My name is Mike, 35M, and my wife is Amanda, 33F. We've been married for 7 years, together for almost a decade. We met in college, did the whole whirlwind romance thing, and for the longest time, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Amanda was fun, charismatic, smart, and stunning. I'd hear people say marriage was hard, but for us, everything felt easy. Or at least it used to. We both have decent jobs. I work as a software developer, and she's a real estate agent. No kids, but we talked about it. Actually, I talked about it more than she did. She always had some excuse. I'm just not ready yet. Or, I want to focus on my career a little longer. I respected it. I didn't want to pressure her. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs. About 4 or 5 months ago, Amanda started acting different. I know, classic, right? But I'm not just talking about the usual stuff you hear about. I mean, yes, the obvious things happened. Less sex, fewer date nights, more girls' nights, where she'd come home way too late. But what really got to me was the way she seemed to look at me. Like I was just there. Like a piece of furniture she didn't notice anymore. Her phone was always face down, and she started getting a lot of texts at weird hours. If I asked about it, she'd roll her eyes and say, "It's work, Mike. God, you're paranoid." She was always just a little too defensive, a little too quick to accuse me of being controlling or suspicious. The thing is, I trusted her. I really did. Maybe I was stupid, or maybe I just didn't want to believe anything was wrong. So I kept brushing off the doubts that were creeping into my mind. I told myself I was overthinking it, that maybe I was just stressed from work, that she loved me and there was no way she'd hurt me like that. But no matter how many times I tried to convince myself, the nagging feeling in my gut didn't go away. And, as it turns out, it was right all along. So there I was, living in this uneasy limbo, where every gut feeling was telling me something was wrong, but I kept pushing it down. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous, paranoid husband. Plus, Amanda always had a way of making me feel like I was the crazy one if I questioned her. She'd sigh, give me this disappointed look, and say, "I can't believe you don't trust me after everything we've been through." I'd cave every damn time. But the weirdness didn't stop. She started putting way more effort into her appearance before these supposed girls' nights. New clothes, new lingerie. Not that I ever saw the lingerie, mind you. Her workouts got more intense too. I tried to joke about it once, saying, "Who are you getting fit for?" with a smile, expecting her to laugh it off. She didn't. Instead, she gave me a cold stare and said, "For myself, Mike. Not everything is about you." Ouch. Then there were the work trips. They were new. She never traveled much for work before, but now suddenly, she had weekend-long conferences in nearby cities. Not far enough for a flight, just a 2-hour drive. The first time, I didn't think much of it. The second time, I felt uneasy. The third time, my gut was screaming at me. But I kept my mouth shut. Because what if I was just overthinking it? What if confronting her would blow up everything for no reason? Then came the night everything started to unravel. It was a Friday. Amanda was going on one of her work trips. She was packing a small bag in our bedroom, and I was just watching her, feeling useless and out of place. She had this cold efficiency about her, barely acknowledging me. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it instinctively. And that's when I saw the message pop up. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you so much. Red heart." My heart dropped into my stomach. I looked at her. She didn't notice. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who's that?" She froze for a split second, then quickly picked up her phone, locking it before I could see more. "Just Sarah. We're finalizing plans for the trip." Her voice was too smooth, too controlled. She smiled at me like I was a child asking about Santa Claus. "Why are you so jumpy lately, Mike?" I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning, and I felt like I was about to throw up. But I wouldn't, accuse her of cheating based on one text. I told myself there had to be an explanation. I nodded, gave a weak smile, and mumbled, "Yeah, okay." But deep down I knew something was seriously wrong. And I was done ignoring it. After Amanda left for her work trip, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the floor. My mind was racing. That text had been clear as day, but I still clung to the desperate hope that maybe it really was a misunderstanding. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the pit in my stomach wasn't going away. I decided right then and there, I needed to know the truth. No more second-guessing myself. No more letting her gaslight me into thinking I was losing it. I didn't want to be the guy who snooped through his wife's stuff, but she left me no choice. So I started digging. First, I checked her laptop. We both knew each other's passwords, or at least I thought we did. When I tried hers, I got the dreaded incorrect password notification. That was new. Amanda never changed her passwords. My heart sank a little more. Next, I grabbed our phone bill. We shared a family plan, so all the call and text records were right there. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the recent activity. And there it was, a number that appeared everywhere. Late-night texts, long calls when she was supposedly working late. The number was there almost every day for the past few months. I copied it down and ran a quick Google search. No name came up, so I used one of those reverse lookup sites. After a minute, it gave me a result: Jason Matthews. I didn't know a Jason Matthews. My blood went cold. I kept scrolling through the records, feeling more and more sick. One call lasted over 2 hours. Another was logged at 2 a.m. Text exchanged at weird hours, not exactly work-related. The pieces were fitting together in the worst way possible. I sat there, phone bill in hand, and everything inside me felt like it was caving in. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, had been lying to my face for months. And the worst part? I still didn't have concrete proof. Just a name, a phone number, and a feeling that was eating me alive. Then I noticed something. Amanda's iPad was on the kitchen counter. She didn't take it on these trips. I walked over, heart pounding, and opened it up. This time, the password worked. I tapped the Messages app, and there they were. A long string of texts with Jason. The most recent one sent just that afternoon. "Leaving now. Can't wait to finally have you to myself all weekend. Red heart." I scrolled up, my stomach churning. The messages were explicit, intimate, the kind of stuff we hadn't said to each other in years. "Last night was amazing. I can still feel your hands on me. Wish I was waking up next to you. Mike's so clueless. I almost feel bad, lol." I had to stop. My vision blurred, my chest tightened, and for a second, I thought I was going to pass out. My hands clenched into fists, as the reality of it all hit me like a freight train. She wasn't just cheating, she was mocking me behind my back. All the defensiveness, the coldness, the late nights, the lies. It all made sense now. I couldn't breathe. My whole life felt like a lie, and I didn't know what the hell to do next. But one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those texts. Minutes? Hours? Time felt meaningless. The betrayal hit me in waves: shock, anger, sadness, like I was drowning, and every time I came up for air, another wave slammed me back down. Eventually, something shifted inside me. The sadness and disbelief curdled into pure, raw anger. Not just at Amanda, but at myself. How had I let this go on for so long? How had I ignored my instincts? She was out there right now, probably in some hotel room with Jason, while I sat here feeling like a kicked puppy. Enough. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I wasn't going to sit here, waiting for her to come back with her fake smile and her bullshit stories. I needed to confront her, now. I wasn't waiting until Monday when she came waltzing back from her conference. I grabbed my phone, hands still shaking, and called her. It rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was smooth, cheerful, like she wasn't doing anything wrong. "Hey, babe," she said. "What's up?" I could hear noise in the background. Music, clinking glasses, and then, faintly, a man's laugh. Jason's laugh? My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Where are you?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. She paused. "I told you, Mike. I'm at the conference dinner. You okay?" I could almost picture her, rolling her eyes, already preparing to spin another lie. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. I took a deep breath. "Cut the crap, Amanda." "I know." Silence. Then, her voice shifted, just a touch of irritation sneaking in. "Know what?" "I know about Jason. I saw the texts. I know you're with him right now." There was a long, dead pause. I could almost hear her brain working, trying to figure out how to talk her way out of this. And then, just like I expected, she went into defense mode. "Are you seriously snooping through my stuff?" she snapped. "Jesus, Mike. That's a huge invasion of privacy." She didn't even deny it. "An invasion of privacy?" I shot back. "You've been lying to my face, cheating on me for months, and I'm the problem because I looked at your texts?" She huffed. "You're being ridiculous. You're overreacting, as usual." There it was, the gaslighting. The same tactic she'd used every time I voiced my suspicions. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I had the proof. I knew the truth. "Stop," I said, my voice low and firm. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I'm done being your fool. You've been sleeping with Jason, and you know it." She didn't respond for a moment. Then, her voice softened into something resembling pity. "Mike, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Things just aren't working between us anymore." I felt something break inside me. After all these lies, all the sneaking around, this was how she justified it. "Then why didn't you just leave?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why did you have to lie to betray me like this?" She sighed, sounding annoyed, like I was the one being difficult. "Because I didn't want to hurt you. I was trying to figure things out." "Bullshit," I snapped. "You didn't want to hurt me? Do you even hear yourself?" She didn't answer. Just more silence, the kind that told me she didn't care enough to fight for us, to fight for me. It was like she'd already checked out of the marriage months ago, and I was the last one to know. I couldn't take it anymore. "Don't bother coming home," I said, my voice cold. "You can stay with Jason, or in a hotel, or wherever the hell you want. Just don't come back here." Before she could respond, I hung up. My heart was pounding, my hands were still shaking, but for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt like I had some control. The ball was in my court now. I knew this was going to get messy. I knew there'd be fallout. But right then I didn't care. She was out of my life, and I was done playing the fool. I sat there in the silence of my home, and I braced myself for what was coming next. After I hung up, the silence was deafening. The house that once felt like home now felt like a cold, empty shell. Every corner seemed to mock me. The couch where we'd watch movies, the kitchen where we'd make dinner together, the bed where we used to sleep side by side. All of it felt like a twisted joke. I needed to get out of there. Sitting in that house, surrounded by memories that now felt tainted, was suffocating. I grabbed my keys and wallet and just drove. No destination, no plan. I didn't care where I ended up. I just needed to move, to breathe. I don't know how long I was driving before I finally pulled over into an empty parking lot. My phone buzzed. A text. From Amanda. Mike, let's talk about this. Please don't do anything drastic. Drastic? Like what? Exposing her for the liar she was? Filing for divorce? I stared at the message, the anger bubbling back up. How dare she act like I was the one being irrational? I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear another word from her. As I sat there, the reality of everything started to sink in. The anger ebbed away, replaced by a cold, hollow feeling in my chest. My marriage was over. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with had betrayed me. I wasn't sure if I felt more grief or relief. I closed my eyes, trying to stop the flood of memories. The good times, the laughter, the promises we made. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life, someone I didn't recognize anymore. I felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner, for believing in the version of her I thought was real. Eventually, I drove back home. The house was still dark, still cold. I locked the door behind me, as if that could somehow keep the pain out. I went to the bedroom and opened the closet, staring at Amanda's clothes. Dresses, blouses, heels, the remnants of the life we built together. Something snapped inside me. I grabbed a handful of her clothes and tossed them onto the bed. I didn't even know what I was doing, but it felt cathartic, like I was purging her from my space. I didn't want her stuff here anymore, reminding me of the betrayal every time I looked at it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch, staring at nothing, feeling like my entire world had shattered into a million pieces. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of messages and missed calls from Amanda. Most of them were the same. Mike, please let's talk. You're overreacting. We can work through this. Work through what? Her screwing another guy behind my back for months. Her lying to me over and over? Then, a new message came in, one that made my blood boil. I think you're being unfair. We were having problems, and I didn't know how to tell you. I made a mistake, but you're blowing this way out of proportion. Unfair. The word echoed in my mind. As if I was the villain here. I didn't respond. Instead, I called a divorce attorney. That day felt like a blur of cold, clinical decisions. The lawyer, a calm older man named David, listened to my story and nodded. You're not the first person to go through this, Mike, he said. It's going to hurt, but you'll come out the other side. What do you want to do? File immediately, I said. My voice felt hollow. I want her out of my life. Okay. We'll serve her the papers. But I have to ask, are you sure you don't want to try mediation first? I shook my head. There's nothing left to mediate. David nodded. I understand. I walked out of his office feeling numb. This wasn't how I ever imagined my life would go. I thought marriage was supposed to be about trust, about having each other's backs no matter what. But Amanda had torched all of that to the ground. And now, there was nothing left to salvage. When I got home, I saw Amanda's car parked in the driveway. My stomach tightened. She was sitting on the front steps, her eyes red, mascara smudged. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, like she was rehearsing some grand apology. Mike, please, let's talk, she said, her voice trembling. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I felt was emptiness. Whatever love I had for her had been buried under layers of betrayal and deceit. There's nothing to talk about, Amanda, I said. You made your choices. Now you'll have to live with them. Her face crumbled. Don't do this. We can fix it. I shook my head. No, you broke it. And I'm done pretending otherwise. I handed her the divorce papers. Her hands shook as she took them. For a moment, she looked like she might say something else, but she didn't. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. I walked past her and into the house, shutting the door behind me. It felt final, like the closing of a chapter one never wanted to end. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something new. Something better. When the door clicked shut behind me, I stood there for a moment, the silence pressing down on me like a weight I could barely lift. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The kind of relief you get when a festering wound finally bursts, painful, but a necessary step toward healing. Amanda didn't knock. She didn't scream or beg. After a few minutes I heard her car start, the tires crunching over the gravel as she pulled out of the driveway. I didn't look out the window to watch her leave. I couldn't. I sat down on the couch, staring at the wall. My mind was blank, empty in a way that was almost peaceful. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I didn't feel like I was on edge, walking on eggshells around someone who was supposed to love me. I was alone, yes, but it felt better than being lied to. Better than being made a fool. Over the next few days, I went through the motions. Work, eat, sleep, or at least try to sleep. It was like my life was on autopilot. Friends reached out, but I didn't feel like talking. What was I supposed to say? Hey, turns out my wife's been banging some guy behind my back. How's your week going? I told my boss I needed some time off. He didn't ask questions. I think the bags under my eyes and the slump in my shoulders told him everything he needed to know. I spent those days cleaning the house, as if scrubbing the floors and wiping down counters could somehow cleanse the memories that haunted every corner. Amanda's stuff was still here. Her clothes, her books, her stupid little coffee mugs with inspirational quotes on them. Each one felt like a slap in the face. I started packing them up, shoving everything into boxes with a mechanical focus. I didn't care if things got wrinkled or broken. She'd broken enough of my life. Why should I care about hers? While I was packing, I found our wedding album tucked away in the back of the closet. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the leather cover. I didn't want to open it, but something compelled me to. I flipped through the pages, each photo like a cruel joke. There we were, smiling, eyes filled with hope and love. Her hand in mine, her vows promising fidelity, trust, and commitment. Lies. I slammed the album shut and threw it into the box. I was done mourning what we used to be. That version of us didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never had. A few days later, Amanda's lawyer reached out. She wanted to settle quickly. I wasn't surprised. She probably wanted to wrap this up before her new life with Jason got too complicated. Fine by me. The less I had to deal with her, the better. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. We didn't have kids, and splitting the assets was straightforward. She didn't contest anything. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she just wanted out. Either way, I didn't care. We met once in person, at the lawyer's office, to sign the final papers. She looked different, thinner, more tired, like the guilt was eating away at her. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Mike, she said softly, as I was about to leave. I really didn't want it to end this way. I paused, looking at her. The woman who had once been my everything now felt like a stranger. It ended the moment you decided to cheat, I said. This is just the cleanup. She flinched, but I didn't stick around to see her reaction. I walked out, the door closing behind me like the final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. That night I sat on my back porch, a cold beer in my hand, staring up at the stars. For the first time in what felt like forever I felt calm. The grief was still there, the pain still raw, but beneath it, there was a glimmer of something else. Freedom. I didn't have to question myself anymore. I didn't have to second-guess every word, every glance, every late-night text. The uncertainty was gone. The truth, no matter how brutal, was better than living in the dark. I took a long sip of my beer, the cool bitterness grounding me. I was broken, sure. But I was still here. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The days that followed were strange. The divorce was final, Amanda was gone, and yet, it felt like she still haunted the edges of my life. Little things would catch me off guard, the faint smell of her perfume on a pillowcase, finding one of her hair ties in the bathroom drawer, or seeing one of her favorite shows pop up in my streaming suggestions. Each reminder felt like a tiny dagger. But they also fueled a growing determination in me. I needed to rebuild, to reclaim my life. I started small. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, moved the couch to the opposite wall, replaced the coffee table we picked out together. I bought new sheets for the bed, nothing fancy, just something that was mine. It felt silly, almost petty, but each little change helped scrape away the residue of our life together. I even went so far as to repaint the bedroom. The soft gray that Amanda loved was now a deep navy blue. It felt like a fresh start, a color that reflected my mood, dark, yes, but solid. Steady. One evening, I was scrolling through my phone when I got a text from Tom, my best friend since college. "Hey man. You've been off the grid. Let's grab a beer." My treat. I stared at the message for a minute. The idea of socializing felt exhausting, but isolation wasn't doing me any favors either. I needed to start facing the world again. "Sure. Tomorrow night?" I replied. "Hell yeah. 7 p.m. at Joe's? Sounds good." The next evening, I walked into Joe's bar, a place that had been our hangout spot for years. The smell of beer, fried food, and stale peanuts was weirdly comforting. Tom was already at a booth, waving me over with a grin. "About time you came out of your cave," he said, handing me a beer. I gave a half smile and took a long sip. "Yeah, well, it's been a hell of a few weeks." He nodded, his grin fading. "I heard, man. I'm really sorry. Amanda's a piece of work." I winced at her name. "Yeah. It is what it is." Tom leaned back, studying me. "How are you really doing?" I took a deep breath. "Honestly? I feel like I've been through a meat grinder. Some days I'm angry, some days I'm numb. But I don't know, there's a weird sense of relief too. Like I can finally stop pretending everything's fine." He nodded, raising his beer. "To not pretending anymore." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine smile tug at the corners of my mouth. We spent the next few hours talking about everything but Amanda, old college stories, work, stupid jokes. For a while, I felt like myself again. After that night, I started to reconnect with life. I went to the gym more, not out of some desire for revenge or to get back at Amanda, but because it helped clear my mind. I started reading again, picking up books I'd left to gather dust. I even signed up for a cooking class, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. One night, after the class, I ran into a woman named Rachel. She was in the class too, a little awkward but with a warm smile and a dry sense of humor that made me laugh. We started talking, and before I knew it, we'd spent an hour chatting in the parking lot. As I drove home, I realized something. I hadn't thought about Amanda once during that conversation. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't doomed to carry this weight forever. Maybe, someday, I'd be ready to let someone else in. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. There were still nights when the loneliness felt suffocating, when memories of Amanda and Jason crept into my mind like poison. But I was learning to sit with those feelings, to acknowledge them and then let them go. I'd started seeing a therapist too. Best decision I made. Talking through the betrayal, the self-doubt, the anger, it helped. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me tools to manage it. One session, my therapist asked me, What do you want for yourself now, Mike? The question caught me off guard. For so long, my goals and plans had been tied to my marriage. Now, it was just me. After a moment I said, I want to feel whole again. I want to trust myself. She smiled. That's a good place to start. I was still a work in progress, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward. The pain was still there, but it wasn't in control anymore. I was. And that felt like a victory. Even as I rebuilt my life, there were still ghosts that needed confronting. The betrayal had carved deep wounds, and though I was healing, some nights felt like I was picking at scabs. The what-ifs and whys haunted me, especially when I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling. One evening, I was scrolling through my email when I saw Amanda's name pop up. It was a short message. I'd like to talk. Please let me know if you're open to it. My immediate reaction was anger. After everything she'd done, what more was there to say? But that anger quickly faded to something else, curiosity. Not about her excuses or apologies, but about myself. I wondered if I was ready to face her and leave that chapter behind for good. Could I confront her and walk away without feeling wrecked? I decided to reply. Okay. One conversation. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. at Joe's. The irony wasn't lost on me. Joe's bar was where I'd started to feel like myself again, and now it would be where I closed the door on Amanda. The next evening, I walked into Joe's, my heart pounding but my mind clear. Amanda was already there, sitting in a corner booth, fiddling with her phone. When she saw me, she gave a tentative smile. She looked different, or maybe I did. Her once confident air seemed dimmed, like she wasn't sure where she fit in anymore. I slid into the seat across from her, keeping my expression neutral. Hey, she said softly, looking down at her hands. Thanks for coming. I nodded, waiting. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She took a shaky breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that probably doesn't mean much now, but I am. What I did was awful. You didn't deserve it. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but they didn't affect me the way they used to. The sight of her sadness didn't make me want to reach out and comfort her. It just felt hollow. Why did you do it, Amanda? I asked, my voice calm but firm. I need to hear the truth. She swallowed hard. I don't know. I was unhappy, and instead of talking to you, I ran away from it. Jason made me feel wanted, and I got caught up in it. It was selfish, and I was a coward. I studied her for a moment. Part of me had expected more lies, more excuses. But this felt genuine. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt pity. Not for me, for her. For the choices she'd made that had cost her everything. You should have just told me, I said. We could have worked through it, or ended things with some dignity. Instead, you blew it all up. She nodded, wiping a tear away. I know. I wish I could go back and do it differently. But you can't, I said quietly. And neither can I. We sat in silence for a minute, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, she whispered, I hope you can forgive me someday. I took a deep breath. Maybe I can. But forgiving you doesn't mean I want you in my life. I'm moving on, Amanda. And I hope you figure out how to do the same. Her shoulders slumped, but she nodded. I understand. I stood up. Goodbye, Amanda. Goodbye, Mike. I walked out of the bar, the cool evening air hitting my face like a bomb. My heart was pounding, but I felt lighter. It was done. The door was closed, and I was free to keep walking forward. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No nightmares, no endless loop of replayed memories. Just sleep, deep, peaceful, and uninterrupted. The next morning, I woke up and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I made a plan for the future. Not a vague hope or a desperate scramble to feel normal, but an actual plan. I'd keep working on myself, keep trying new things, and keep the door open for whatever life had to offer next. Because for the first time in a long time, I realized the person I was becoming was someone I liked. And that person didn't need Amanda or her betrayal to define him. I was free. And that was enough. Life didn't magically become perfect after that conversation with Amanda. There was no dramatic movie moment where everything suddenly clicked into place. Healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt unstoppable, like I was finally reclaiming my life. Other days I'd catch a glimpse of an old photo or hear a song that reminded me of her, and a pang of sadness would hit me out of nowhere. But the difference now was that the sadness didn't consume me. It passed. Like a passing storm cloud rather than an endless downpour. Each time, I reminded myself that I had survived the worst of it, and I was still standing. I kept busy, but not in a frantic, avoidant way. I was choosing things that made me feel alive again. The cooking class turned into a regular hobby. I discovered that I actually enjoyed making elaborate meals for myself, no matter how ridiculous it seemed to whip up a 3-course dinner for one. I also started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Something about caring for animals who had been abandoned or mistreated felt right. We were all a little broken, but that didn't mean we couldn't heal. Plus, the wagging tails and purring cats were a great reminder that joy could come in the simplest forms. One Saturday afternoon at the shelter, I was trying to wrangle a particularly mischievous golden retriever puppy named Max when I heard a laugh behind me. "That one's got more energy than he knows what to do with," a voice said. I turned around and saw Rachel, the woman from my cooking class. Her auburn hair was tied back in a ponytail, and she was holding a tiny gray kitten in her arms. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Rachel, hey!" I said, surprised but happy to see her. "Hey yourself," she replied. "Didn't know you volunteered here." "Yeah, it's been a few months now," I said, trying to keep Max from chewing through his leash. "I guess I needed something to distract me." She nodded, her expression understanding. "Distractions can be good. Sometimes they lead to new things." Her words hung in the air for a second. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to experience in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate kind, but the quiet, steady kind that suggested maybe life still had good things in store for me. "Want to grab a coffee after this?" I asked, my voice steady but my heart hammering. She smiled. "I'd love to." That coffee turned into a walk, which turned into dinner. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, her love of photography, my new cooking obsession, her ridiculous collection of succulents that she kept accidentally killing, my chaotic attempts at learning how to make pasta from scratch. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It wasn't the kind of all-consuming passion that blinds you to everything else. It was slow, steady, and built on something real. Honesty. Respect. Two people who had been through their own battles and come out the other side, maybe a little scarred, but stronger for it. We took things slow. I wasn't rushing to fill the void Amanda left. I was learning to enjoy my life first, and Rachel just happened to be a beautiful part of it. One evening, a few months later, I was standing in my kitchen, stirring a pot of homemade chili, when Rachel came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist. "You know," she said, resting her head on my back, "you're pretty good at this whole life rebuilding thing." I chuckled. "It's a work in progress." "Isn't everything?" she said softly. She was right. Life was always a work in progress, full of unexpected turns, some painful, some beautiful. I'd learned that the hard way, but I'd also learned something else. The pain didn't have to define me. The betrayal didn't have to be the end of my story. I turned around, looking into her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I wasn't the same person I had been before Amanda's betrayal. I was stronger, wiser, and maybe a little more guarded. But I was also open to new possibilities, new joys, and new love. If I could give anyone in a similar situation advice, it would be this: trust yourself. Listen to your gut. And know that even when it feels like everything is falling apart, you can rebuild. Not into the person you used to be, but into someone even better. I took a deep breath, kissed Rachel's forehead, and smiled. My story wasn't over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning.